Okay, so where we left off, we basically had all of this stuff set up so that it's pulling the page title properly. We've got a title up here, and if you were to go and look at the source code, right, you've got stuff that it's also giving us an ID based on the page name and so on and so on. Okay, and then I think I showed you this one. So if we went to index, right, you see that it switches us over to home, it loads a style sheet and so on. All right, so the point is now we're ready to do a couple things. One, we're ready to go ahead and look at the navigation that we're going to use, but we're also ready to pull this stuff out and put it into a functions page that we can just include into our head.inc.php, which is also going to be loaded into all of our template pages, or pages that are generated from the template. And so, one of the first things that I want to go ahead and point out is that, let's see, right here, we had visited our basic outline and for the pages that we were going to make, but I don't think I actually generated all the pages. So what we talked about was, having an index page, an about us page, and then the other two pages that I haven't yet made would be FAQs and discounts. And I could go ahead and also just do my navigation so it's easy to just pop around to the different pages. Now, what I do want to say is that your pages might not be named this. You can name them whatever you want. Just remember that if you want a space, if you want the name of it to actually just really easily turn into the name of the page that appears on the page and in the title and so on, that you can use underscores instead of spaces. Right now we're not filtering out dashes, so if you want to have something that actually has a dash, you can still do that. Just know that if you do use a dash, it'll show up. And it won't capitalize the second word that's behind the dash. All right, so you would have to write some more filtering in your function in order for that to work that way. So you don't have to use these names. You can name your pages whatever you want, because you might not even be doing a page that's based on this electrician site. So you can sort of follow along with this, but you'll see how easy it is to just really quickly make and delete pages and change the pathways that go to them in the linking structure and stuff. So okay, we're gonna make these other two pages really quickly. If I go to my file system, you'll see that we've got about us, we've got index, and of course I'm going to leave my template the way it is. Because that's going to be the thing that I generate stuff from. So let's duplicate that again, and we'll create this as FAQs. And I'm going to go ahead and keep mine capitalized. Now the thing is that I need to always make sure that I capitalize it even when I link to it, because on some servers they are case sensitive. That's just something to be aware of. So, and then I'm going to duplicate it one more time. And then this time I will call it discounts. I think I'm just going to leave it as discounts. I could do discounts underscore and underscore specials, but I actually like the idea that the word would be shorter in terms of like, effective and efficient navigation. So I'm going to leave it like that. Now I've got the structure in place that if I wanted to go in to my head, right, I can go down and find where my navigation is here. And now what I can do is I can say it's going to go to index.php, and this would be called, instead of index, this we talked about would be services, but it also is just going to happen to be the landing page. Okay, and that means also, I would say, for the purposes of what I'm doing in this demonstration, I could go up here and instead of welcome, I would want to call this services, and you could even say like electrical services or something like that. Okay, or you could call it, like your San Diego electrician resource or whatever you want to say right there. That's what it would say. Okay, and here, let's do this one. I think that the second one that maybe we would want to have is about us. Let's try that, about us, and then this would be about us with an underscore. Oops. .php. Okay. And this one would be, let's do FAQs. FAQs.php. And then this page 3 would turn into FAQs, or frequently asked questions. Okay, and then this last one would be discounts.php. And again, this would be discounts. And this is one of those situations where, like, if you know you're going to have a page that's called FAQs, but you don't want it to say FAQs at the top, maybe you actually want it to say frequently asked questions, this is where you could create another case. Okay, that's actually something that might be very, very helpful. And so in the case that it is, let's copy this, and I'll just show you what I'm talking about. Let's paste this again, but in the case that it is FAQs, and this is definitely going to be case sensitive. All right, so the page title would be frequently asked questions. Okay, and the page class could still be FAQs, right? And if you want that to be lowercase, so right, FAQs, then it would be really easy to, or it could just even be FAQ, whichever one, okay? If you want that to be lowercase so that you don't have to worry about it being uppercase when you're typing class or ID names, whatever, then that's fine. So that's just an example of something that you could do, all right? You don't have to do that, but anyway, let's go ahead, and we've got our navigation here. Now, one of the things that you need to remember is that we had also created the fallback navigation that's in the footer. So it would make sense then to also copy this. I'm going to save this, to copy it and go into foot.inc.php and come down in here where we have our no script tag, and we're going to replace this entire list. And that way, oh, my screen's doing something a little weird. Okay, so we're going to replace this entire list, and I'm going to just tab this stuff in. So as to make sure that our information is actually proper in the foot too. Okay, so don't forget about that. So let's just go ahead and save that, and if we want, before we do anything else, we can just go ahead, before we start to pull this out for functions page, let's go ahead and save this, and let's do a test on here. And we're gonna hit refresh, and you see that now we've got actual link names, and if we go, for instance, to services, it says electrical services, and it's our index page. It says electrical services up here. You could go to FAQs. FAQ says frequently asked questions because I created that extra filter. And it says it up here as well. But if we were to, for instance, go and look at the developer source, we would see that it says FAQs in lowercase for the ID. Okay, so that's actually kind of helpful. And then if we go to discounts, it says discounts and so on. Now, we want to start building the function. To do that, what we want to do is get all of this stuff that's right here, and we want to cut that, all right? And then I'm going to create a new file, and it's going to be just a regular PHP file, not the template, but a PHP file. And I'm going to get rid of everything that's in this new file, and I'm going to paste what I had. And oh, the other thing too, before I paste that, sorry, is I need some PHP tags. Let's do that. Open and close PHP tags. Okay, so let's paste that there, and let's save this, and we're going to call this functions. And I'm not going to put the functions.inc. All right, functions is always something that's just by default is an included file. So I'm just going to call it functions. You can do .inc if you want to be really consistent, that's fine. But I'm going to call it functions.php. I'm putting it inside of my, gotta make sure you're putting it in the right spot, okay? So make sure that it goes into your functions website includes folder. So that's where I'm going to put it. Okay, and so that's what we've got to start. Now, the other thing too that I'm going to suggest, and I should sort of insist actually, is I want to make sure that, actually let's just do it with double slashes. I want to make sure that you are getting in the habit of making good comments. So we're going to call this page name function. Okay, and I'll just actually say page naming function. And even though it's not yet a function, we haven't actually officially turned it into a function yet, I am going to go ahead and have it say this right now, okay? And then what I'll do is copy this and bring it down below, and we'll paste and we'll say end page naming function. Okay. All right, so let's just save that, and then let's go back to template, and let's put that as an included file here. All right, so we'll say include, and then we will do in parentheses, or in, not parentheses, in quotation marks, we'll say includes, and then we will say functions.php. Okay, again, this is where some people will get confused, right? So I want to make sure that you don't get confused. Even though this file is head.inc.php, and it is actually in the same file folder as the functions.php, some of you might go, oh, well then that just needs to be the pathway. No. Remember what I said before, that because head.inc.php is being pulled into the source code of whatever your other template file was, whether it's index or template or about us or whatever, it's being pulled in as if it's natively part of this file. It needs to take the pathway that would be relevant or relative to this template.php or whatever the other file is going to be, okay? Whatever file it's being pulled into, okay? So because it's an include, just make sure that you understand that. Okay, so we're going to include the functions.php file. So let's go ahead and save that, and then let's test to make sure that this is still functional. Hit refresh, and everything is still working just fine. So we're in good shape. Okay, nothing has changed. Now, the next thing that we need to do, next thing we need to do is go into our functions page, and we actually need to turn this thing into a function. So let's do that. Right up here, right up here, we are going to say function, and then we're going to give it a function name. So we'll call this page name, and I'm using camel case, and I am going to put this ending curly brace down here. Okay. The other thing that I want to do is I want to be able to see very clearly that all of this is within the function, and I'm going to save it. All of this is within the function, and so I need to make sure it's tabbed in so it's really easy to read. Now, here's the thing. It's not going to immediately work. Okay, I'm just going to hit save, but I want to show you why it's not going to work and how it's not going to work. So if this happens to you, you won't freak out and you'll kind of understand. So I'm going to come over here, hit refresh. Okay, and it's saying that there's an undefined variable called page class in head.inc.php on line 18. Okay, well, let's figure out why that is. Okay, so if I go into the head.inc.php file, look on line 18, it's saying it's trying to use page class. Okay, well, something that you should be aware of, all right, is that we have this issue going on where if you look inside of functions, page class and page title, right, these things are being generated inside of a function. Okay, and if you remember from our conversation about other functions, just banking basic functions, that anything that you create that is inside of a function is not going to work unless you actually call the function. Right now, all we're doing is declaring the function. That's all we're doing. We're just declaring a function. Declaring is actually creating a function so that it can be used later. We're not actually using it right now, though. We're just creating it. So over here in template, the first thing that you would need to do then is let's come down and let's do this. And we're going to terminate where it says include, and then after that on the next line we're actually going to use that function. So what we need to do is say page name like this, like that, and we need to actually just use the function. And just to double check, we can look back in functions and make sure that that is the name that we gave the function. It's page name, and all you have to do to call it is to say the name of it with open and close parentheses and then terminate it. All right, Unless you are requiring that you pass certain arguments here or parameters inside the parentheses, you don't have to. So let's just save that. And we're still going to have a problem, I'll warn you, but let's hit refresh. Okay, and now it's doing something a little different. It's a little bit confused again, because it's still saying that the variables are undefined. And the reason now that it's saying this, it's giving us a problem now, is because of a thing that's referred to as variable scope. And so when you use a variable, it has some different scopes. It has a local scope and it has a global scope. And whenever you create something that is inside of a function, and then you include the function from another file, the thing that's happening is that the scope of the variables here are not global. And so I can't use a variable that's in here without first creating that variable with a global scope. So what we have to do is go back into functions, and we need to go into inside of the function itself, and we need to actually give page title and page class, both of these, we need to give them a global scope. So what we're going to do is I'm going to copy this, and we need to announce those variables as global page title, and then again, let's just copy this, and we need to say global page class. And I'm not going to bother with making page itself just plain old page. I'm not going to bother with making that global because I don't think we actually used page anywhere as a variable inside of our template file. So let's just make these two right now. And if you were to add any other kinds of special variables in here, you would also need to come and modify this and add a global scope to these variables. So let's save that and let's do a test now. And you see everything goes back to normal and it's working. All right, and if I wanted to just keep clicking around, make sure everything is functional, the other thing I would double check is go over here to view source for my developer stuff and make sure that it's actually getting the page class as well. Okay, and it seems to be working just fine now. And so what's cool now at this point is that anytime for the head of the document, all right, this is going to be really important to remember. In the head of the document at this point, what we're doing is we're pulling in a functions page. So any special functions that you write that you want to be pulled in to all pages so that they can be used within all pages, you're going to put inside of this functions page, which is pretty cool. So like you're going to have a copyright function, you're going to have other stuff too, right? Now, here's something that's really important to remember. I want you to see something right now with these functions. Everything is being stored inside of a variable, which is why we had to do the global scope. Okay, that's why we had to announce it. But let's say that we make a little testing function. I want to show you for a comparison. Okay, I'm just going to say test. And let's make a function called like hello, okay? And the function is going to just be that we say echo, hey, okay? All right, so if we do this, in fact, so it's a little bit easier, let's say hey, and let's put a whole bunch of exclamation marks, okay? So it'll be really obvious. So let's save that, and whenever we go to use this function now, let's just put it up here. We'll say hello. Oops, I gotta spell it right. Like that. I want to show you what happens if we come here and hit refresh. You see that automatically what it does is it announces it right exactly where I used it, as opposed to the function that was here, the pageName function. If you look, I announced the pageName function. I actually called it and used it before the doc type, but you don't see a bunch of crap up here before, excuse me, stuff up here before the doc type, because it was all stored in variables that I then later used down in the body of the page. Or I should say, I don't want to, in the head and in the body of the page. Okay, but with hello, because I'm actually literally echoing something, okay, using the echo handler, right, it ends up going directly into the space where I use the actual function, because I'm echoing it, so it's going to echo it right then and there where I announce it. Okay, so you got to be aware of that. And I don't have to do any kind of like global scope or anything like that if I'm just echoing something in a function, even if it's coming out of an included file, because I'm not passing any variables. All I'm doing is telling it, hey, do this right now. Okay, so let me get rid of that. I just want to make that really clear. That's really important. So like for instance, if you go and you don't properly build your functions, like this is the other half of that coin, right? The other side of that coin is that if you go and you build functions that use the echo command, and it's not actually just storing variables so that you can echo it wherever you want in the page, the minute that you put your stuff up here, you say, hey, include functions, and it runs through the functions, and there's something, you know, let's say that's not in an actual function. Let's just say that you got rid of that and you just said echo, okay, again, it's just going to echo it, all right, because I didn't put this in a function and I'm loading an included page, so it's going to run through all this code. It's going to do this function, store the variables, blah, 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 right? And then all of a sudden, it's going to echo something. So let's do a test and see, I don't even have that function in there that says hello anymore. Let's just save everything. And if I refresh the page, see, it still says hey. And the reason is because it's including this. And so a lot of the exercises that you might have done, you didn't actually store inside of functions. What you did was you actually just have, you know, something echoing or whatever right then and there where you use it. So if I'm requiring that you go and put it in a functions page, then that means that you actually literally have to turn it into a function. Okay, so that's really important. And you still could have, let me undo what I just did. You still could have this. Let's save that. So let's pretend like this was like maybe your copyright or something like that. And you didn't actually just store the information in variables. Let's say that you actually just want to use that function right where you want to use it to echo stuff. So if I keep that there, because I'm loading stuff up inside of the head and I'm pulling functions in, that literally loads it for the entire page, including whatever happens in the foot.inc.php page. I don't have to pull functions in again. In fact, I shouldn't pull, I shouldn't pull functions in again. It's something I shouldn't actually do. If I tried to pull functions in again inside of my foot page, what's actually going to happen is that it's going to see that I'm trying to declare the same exact function with the same name a second time. And that is an illegal operation, and it's going to fail your page. It's going to give you a fatal error. It's going to say you cannot redeclare a function. Okay, so really the only time that you should even pull the functions in is up here inside of the head at the very, very top. And here's the other thing about pulling an include file at the very beginning of the page is that you want to make sure that you don't do that. Okay, like see how line 1 has empty space on it? That's going to give you a problem. It's going to do something called sending additional headers, and it's going to give you a fatal error. You want to make sure that you don't even put one space there, right? That one space is basically sending characters into the page, and then you're trying to do a different kind of header. So just make sure that you always start, if you're going to start your page before the doc type with PHP, that you start it on the very first spot on the page. And when I say that, I don't mean that like this include thing has to be, you know, it doesn't have to be up here, for instance, but the beginning of the PHP tag must actually start in the very first character of the page. So all of those things are actually pretty important when you're starting to pull files into other files and use functions and stuff. So anyway, the point that I was actually making when I kind of got sidetracked with all that other really important information is that if I actually decide to keep this hello function in here, right, and I am still calling the functions page up inside of the head inc PHP file, because head inc.php is getting loaded at the top of our main, you know, template or index or whatever, and then later down in that same page the foot's getting loaded, then those functions will actually still be loaded up and ready to use anytime you want to use them in the foot.inc.php file. So if I wanted to come over here in the foot And let's just say, just for the heck of it, so we can see what's going on, like right before the footer, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna call, oops, I'm gonna put in a PHP tag and I'm gonna say hello. I'm gonna use that function that echoes something right then and right there. Okay, let's save that. Let's do a test. Let's go refresh the page, and it goes away up there, but if I scroll down, you'll see that it shows up right there. Okay, so if you were to, for instance, go and let's take that out. I'm going to cut that, and let's take that out, and let's go down here, and as if you're going to, let's say, make a copyright inside of your footer, for instance, you could, instead of this being a link, let's just say that it's going to be your copyright, but instead it's just going to be this thing right now that says hello. Let's save that. All right, and hit refresh, and you see there it pops up there. So if you're using that echo command, you can stick it anywhere without having to do the variable global scope, and it'll just announce itself wherever you need it to announce itself. I'm not suggesting that you definitely put your copyright right here. It actually might be nice centered underneath all this content, whatever, however you want to do it. But my point is, let me undo that, okay, and I want to get rid of this test function. The point of all of that is about how you can use functions, when and where you can use them, how you have to call them up, how do you have to declare them first, and then when and where you can use them, and so on. Okay, so hopefully this will help you get started, and just remember that you can make a lot of changes to any of this. You can see how flexible it is, and part of your job is to do the things that you need to do to tailor your website to be custom so that it isn't exactly like mine. Okay?